Layovers, your weekly dose of aviation innovation.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard from the flight deck. This is Paul Papadimitriou.
Hello everybody, this is Alex Hunter.
We'll be your pilots for this show about the news, the startups and the technologies defining the modern air travel experience.
Our flight time today, an hour and 20 minutes, and we expect an on-time arrival. Coming up on this flight, 2 engines shut down on the Singapore Airlines A330. Delta releases the Internet's safety video. Emirates pokes fun at the state of travel in the US, but sees the Dutch government blocking its expansion in Amsterdam. The muddy story of hacking plane commands from a passenger seat. TravelersBox will save you from all those foreign coins. And Alex flies a never-before-seen Dreamliner.
As we reach our cruising altitude, I'm going to turn off the fasten seatbelt sign for you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and let's turn on those noise-cancelling headphones.
Flight 15 to Atlanta. Hi, Alex.
Hi, this is weird. We're in the same room. I don't know if you guys know this listening, but Paul and I always do this remotely. So I did it in my house. Paul does it in his house. And through Paul's editing magic, it all sounds like we're in the same room. But we actually are in the same room. And it's freaking me out.
We both are very careful at just looking at our screen and not at each other with all the notes we're having. Atlanta, because you've been to Atlanta recently, right?
I just went through Atlanta on my way to Florida, and then I went back through JFK. But Atlanta fascinated me, so I thought it'd be a fun airport to talk about.
Yeah, I've never been, so I'm very curious to listen to what you say. By the way, you flew into a very new kind of Dreamliner on your way back, right?
I flew on the 747-400 Dreamliner.
So tell us.
I actually had to. I sent Paul a text right after this happened, but my flight from it was from JFK to Heathrow. I got a text message 36 hours before saying, "I'm really sorry, but your flight is canceled." This is on Virgin, and I was so disappointed because it was going to be my first flight on a Dreamliner, which I'd been gloating to Paul about since I booked it. And so I called up Virgin to find out what had happened, because 36 hours in advance is unusual.
Yeah.
And they weren't able to tell me other than it was mechanical, which is, again, very strange, 36 hours in advance. When I was talking to the guy, I said, look, is there another 787 flight? 'Cause I really want to go on. That's why I booked to go back via New York and not through Atlanta again. He's like, yep, you're on. Let's have a look. Yes. So I put you on VS46, which I knew was a 747 before he even said. He's like, you're on the 744 Dreamliner. And like, I literally face palmed, like right in the middle of the restaurant. Like, I wasn't being a jerk and using my phone in the restaurant. There was no one else in it, but I was just like, okay. So, and I'm sitting on my laptop going, no, this to myself now. It's a 747, but I'm not going to argue with this guy because he doesn't know what he's talking about. So, yeah, I can report that it was a 12-year-old Dreamliner with 4 engines.
I'm happy because we're still on par.
But I tell you, it was a 5-hour and 37-minute flight from JFK, which is fast because the winds were so strong. So it was really, really, really bumpy the whole flight. And I have to say, it felt very comforting and reassuring to be on a 747. I don't think any other airplane could have given me that sense of, it's moderate turbulence, but
yeah. So we're gonna start the show with some news, and the first one is actually about the US. I mean, this is a story you found, so go ahead.
So this is again the ongoing saga.
As always,
15 episodes in, we're still talking about it. The ME3 versus the US. The big US Airlines. And the US Airlines issued a report, as they've been kind of tossing reports back at each other, that says that the rapid expansion of Gulf carriers in the US is taking passengers away from Delta, American, and United instead of attracting new travelers, as the Middle Eastern carriers have claimed. And they sort of go into the details of this. But then James Callahan, who is the chief counsel for Etihad, came out and said, if you read the report, what they're saying ultimately is that they're whining because they're being forced to compete. And he says, quote, when you compete, your prices go down, and therefore you attract more passengers. What they fail to tell you is the overall size of those markets where they do compete with us have actually increased their passenger numbers. That's called competition. That's the success of open skies, end quote.
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, when you read that, I mean, there's just no denying. I think they just shoot themselves in the feet, the US Airlines, by providing that report.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a joke.
There's been a lot of analysis on this report in various outlets, both aviation related and general, and they've all said drawn the same conclusion, that this was a massive, anyone can put the dots together on this and see, oh yeah, your actual numbers in those markets have increased because your prices are lower. So they're bitching because they're not making the same revenue per seat mile as they usually do, because So it's like every time that the US throws up something over the wall, the Middle Eastern carriers are so easily just able to just slam it back down. But so in terms of process here, it's still going to the White House, and they are accepting comment, or the U.S. government is accepting comment.
Absolutely.
And then it should be this month, they'll decide whether they're actually going to do anything about it, i.e. open a formal hearing. My guess is it will be sort of a bureaucratic acknowledgement of the U.S. Airlines complaint that will never actually end up in anything happen. That's where I would put my money.
Yeah, and it also means that we probably will have more reports and more news developed in the coming months. I think the war is still heating up. I mean, I think the U.S. Airlines will throw everything they have to try to lobby the government. In that case, lobby the public towards them. So I haven't seen any polls. I should have looked, but I haven't seen any polls of how the U.S. public feels about this story.
It's a good question. I don't know either. I should have asked while I was in the U.S.
But I mean, I'm sure we'll see some stories coming up for that. Still talking about American Airlines, I mean, U.S. Airlines, since, you just said, I mean, the Etihad Council said they have to compete. J.D. Power has released its satisfaction with airlines in North America, which, interestingly, actually, the overall numbers rose for a third year straight. So it means actually people are happier with the state of the airline industry when they're flying in the U.S., so that's pretty good. In terms of the legacy carrier, Alaska Airlines is still dominating the rankings. Have you ever flown Alaska Airlines?
I have.
Is it a good
It's
company?
not bad.
I've never flown them.
Yeah, it's not bad. They were not friendly to Virgin America, so I have a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth for them. But in terms of product, they're fine. They have a very modern fleet. They're a good airline.
The Delta ranks in number 2 again for the legacy ones, and American Airlines in third place. You flew Delta?
I did. I flew Delta from Atlanta to Fort Myers and then Fort Myers to New York for the first time in 15 years.
How is that?
I don't know. I don't know how I feel. I tell you this. Every single person I spoke to on the ground in the airplane was either very efficient and good at their job or extremely nice. So across the board, their people were good. The planes were pretty old, but that's okay. But they still had Wi-Fi. The flights were very full. Actually, really quick story. When we were in Fort Myers trying to fly to New York, the captain, which I think is such a lovely touch, came out to the gate area, got on the PA and explained the delay, which I thought was a really nice touch and doesn't happen. Yeah. And he said, look, because of a JFK ground stop delay, due to weather in the New York area, we're going to be delayed about 45 minutes. And everyone's like, okay, it is what it is. At least we're in the comfort of the gate and not in the airplane. And a chap in like shorts and a tank top and sunglasses on his head walks up to the captain, flashes his badge and said, board the airplane, we're going to be on time. And the guy looks at his badge and goes, the captain looks at the badge and goes, awesome. Turns out he's a controller at New York Center. He made some phone calls, and we were right on time. No delays, no circling over JFK. We were right on time. This is my second ATC story in 4 flights.
Wow, never happened to me. That is true that Delta is, I always have, for domestic meaning flights within the US, the planes are always a bit old, but I never have actually had any issues. So it's interesting that they're number 2. I haven't flown American Airlines in forever, so I can say in terms of low cost category, JetBlue is still ranking number 1. It's not very surprising, and Southwest number 2. Have you flown any of those recently?
Yeah, Southwest I flew in March, and they were excellent, really outstanding. The boarding process is still a little weird to me, but in flight, My plane that I flew on was 28 days old, Wi-Fi, unbelievable staff. They're a very, very good airline.
It's interesting in the JD Power report, they say one thing which caught my attention. They said that about 1 in 5 passengers choose an airline based on specific things like the brand, obviously, the customer service, in-flight entertainment, or comfortable seating. It's 1 in 5. It doesn't mean, again, pricing is probably still the number one factor, but you still have a pretty hefty category of people choosing out of, the passenger experience, and not just because they have a loyalty or just because it's the lowest cost. That's interesting.
It makes sense in some instances because if you think there's some flights within the US that are 6 hours long when you're going from LA to New York. So you're going to want something that's going to be comfortable irrespective of who's providing it in some regards.
Yeah, sure. Still in the US, Delta, because we're talking about Delta announced very good profits actually, to the point that I think Skift headlined that they're like, flush with cash, which is always in that debate of the ME3. It's always the kind of thing. I mean, the storyline seems to be the poor American airlines don't have enough money to compete with the very flush Middle Eastern airlines. And actually, when you look at their profit record, they're actually doing very well in the US.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe they have another structure, they have shareholder structure, and they have to pay back. But one of the things that the CEO Anderson told the reporters were that he was confident that a low oil price would stay. They actually saved 25% just by having these low prices for oil. That's pretty actually impressive.
It is impressive.
Interestingly, when you think about it, it also means that the appeal of having new aircraft that are more fuel efficient, it doesn't disappear, but you can push it away a little bit. Because if you make a low 25% of savings, you can say, oh yeah, I can wait 1 or 2 more years before I buy new aircraft.
Yeah, and Anderson has done a great job with Delta structurally, financially. I mean, he's turned around an airline that was on the brink of extinction, just a few years ago, and turned it into this money-making machine. Although he's on the beginning of the safety videos, and it's just the most awful thing I've ever seen.
Yeah,
not the safety video itself, but just his bit. It's awful.
Actually, Americans they do that a lot. When you have the CEO of the airline welcoming you on board, I don't like it.
It's so cringeworthy.
Yeah,
it's so cringeworthy.
It's never been fun. Maybe a Richard Branson could do that in a fun way, but it just doesn't work. They should just not do it.
But he's done a great job. I mean, that airline is making money.
Though you could say that the fact that all these mergers have happened, it kind of cut the price wars. There was a lot of price wars, and then suddenly you have big 4 airlines.
Yeah.
That also so that's why maybe they don't like the competition coming from abroad, because you we saved the market by only having 4 airlines. I mean, they have more, obviously, the low cost, but shit, now there's other people trying to eat our lunch from outside.
But you're right about the aircraft as well, because I think I sent you a message while I was in JFK saying that Delta operated the DC-9 until last year. I think those were inherited from Northwest, so they probably just didn't have time to phase them out. But DC-9.
Yeah, we're talking about planes. I don't know if anyone listening has flown DC-9 recently, but I haven't in for a pretty long time, to be honest. So, in the same breath, the Anderson said, again talking to reporters, that for him the fees were not going away. All these fees that we have on tickets, and the reason, he says, and I won't have your takes, is consumers want choice, and consumers want to pay for their own desires in terms of how they specify a product. So I think you'll see a lot more unbundling, not just in the airline business, but also in all consumer businesses. I think it makes sense to a certain extent. Of course, you have, but that's not really fees. That's deciding what kind of product you want. Here, there are some fees you just cannot escape. That's not exactly the same thing he's answering here, right?
No, I think the a la carte plane ticket is here to stay, unfortunately. But we're not, as consumers, we're not seeing the benefit of that. It's just additional. We're not seeing the prices come down as we take things away from the experience. Like, I'm traveling hand luggage only, therefore my ticket should be exponentially cheaper than somebody who's got 65 bag, and it just doesn't happen to work that way. It's a little bit of posturing as far as I'm concerned, but I think he's right. I don't think it's going away.
Some more dynamic pricing should be introduced. I mean, I'll talk about it a bit later about my story with flying Lufthansa from Milan. I think there's I mean, I understand they have legacy software and stuff that doesn't allow them maybe to do a lot, but there are more, I'm sure that there will be more dynamism into how you price your plane ticket at some point. There's no way out. Just a quick one. I used to fly US Airways, and you guys know maybe that they were merged with American Airlines, and we have a date. Apparently, the US Airways brand will start to be sunset in October. So I just want to say goodbye to US Airways. I actually kind of like them. So it was a full. I like the brand, also the imagery about them. It was something that the recent one.
Yeah, they did. They acquired an airline that I quite liked called America West that was based in. Well, America West acquired US Airways, which acquired American. Doug Parker was the CEO of America West back in the day, and has steered this major acquisition of its older brothers and sisters. So, yeah, it'll be sad to see yet another airline brand disappear forever.
I think what will really the sign that this airline will be gone is when. Have you ever flown to Charlotte?
No.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main hub, if not their main hub. I mean, I remember flying there.
Charlotte.
The entire airport is basically US Airways, and I think this, when all the signs will be down there, means that this airline will have disappeared and will stay only in memory. Anyway, so farewell to US Airways. Still in the US, but US looking out, the pre-clearance. Have you ever done pre-clearance yourself?
I have not. I think this is great, though. I love this idea. So there are a few airports in the world, Dublin and Shannon and Ireland being two of them, where you can, if you're doing a stopover or even if you're originating from there, you can clear U.S. Customs and Immigration there. So when you land in the U.S., you don't have to go through the nightmare at JFK or Atlanta or anywhere else like that. And so they're expanding this process to 11 more airports, and they include Amsterdam, Heathrow. Hooray! Can you imagine what that's going to be like? Manchester, Madrid, Brussels, Narita, Stockholm, Oslo, Punta Cana, and Istanbul. And this is moving towards a goal of having a third of all U.S. bound air travelers doing pre-clearance by 2024, which actually isn't that far away.
No, it's not.
So this is great news.
No, in terms of efficiency, is great, because then, of course, your experience will be much faster. The one caveat, I would say, and I want to have your take on it, is that some airports, I mean, currently it's only I think Abu Dhabi, and there's a few airports that have to, Dublin and
Shannon, yeah.
But if you go through pre-clearance, so let's say you, Alex, arrive at London Heathrow 2 hours before or 3, because you like to be early at the airport, then you go through pre-clearance. The airport has to be laid out in a way that allows this pre-clearance to go, and then you cannot go back, because you're basically in the US in some kind of symbolic way. Does it mean that suddenly, right now, for instance, the lounges are built before that? You cannot separate people. So will they have to build new lounges for people, or just not have any lounges? Maybe for frequent travelers, which is maybe, we don't know always, you and me have access to lounges, but for people who are frequent travelers, if the airport doesn't think this through well, you could be like, oh, I go pre-cleared, and then I just have to wait in front of the gate for 2 hours.
I think it will be that. I think it'll be like Schengen and non-Schengen departures from airports that support both, where there's a pier of gates that you have to do outbound immigration to. But I think it will literally be that. This is my guess. I'm not basing this on anything.
We don't know.
But I think you'd have a set of gates that can accommodate U.S. pre-clearance, and you would be the last thing that you do before you board, I hope. Probably. So you can still enjoy the amenities that the airport has to offer. But
well, really interesting. I mean, but I'm also like you welcoming.
Because now when you go to the U.S. and if you have a connection, if you're doing what I did, you fly into Atlanta, you have to go through U.S. immigration, collect all your bags,
yes.
which is such a nightmare because you have no idea how long it's going to take. It's really stressful.
Yeah.
Now this is no longer going to be an issue.
Yeah, I've had that experience at JFK where I had to do exactly like you said, and then I had to connect into Phoenix, and I almost just didn't make it in time because the lines at immigration at JFK were just far too long. So, which always happens. We'll talk about JFK in one of these episodes. But it's a great airport, but depending, of course, it's a very busy airport. Since we're talking about this, I mean, Milan is not in the list of airports that will have pre-clearance, but I flew, like I said in the previous episode, I flew Emirates from Milan to JFK. So it's the first time I flew a free route. So basically flying, a non-Italian airline to the US, which was not also not it was not American airline either. So it's interesting. So what they do is they fly from Dubai to Milan, and then they stop over and then continue to JFK. This is a bit what I've done. Remember, Alex, when I did join you in Hong Kong, I flew to Bangkok first, and then the plane was emptied, and then new passengers boarded. Some like me stayed in. It was an interesting experience to see that. It's a bit bizarre because for me, I always associated, Emirates with flying to Dubai. So being here was a bit, it made sense for me where I was before. I was in Prague just before. So I just took a quick flight to go from Prague to Milan. And it was a nice experience. I want to go just quickly because it's a very controversial, still a very controversial issue. Not a lot of airports offer countries offer fifth freedom rights. Fifth freedom is basically what I just said. You fly from point A, which is the original where the company, the airline is based, to a point B, and then continue to point C. And you have the right in point B to take new passengers. And actually, when they opened this route, Emirates, they had then to shut it down because they were in court. They won in the end. That's why it's still happening. Have you ever flown a fifth freedom route?
I was just thinking about that. I don't know. Not in the last decade. I probably have, but not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, so they're I mean, basically the freedom, the first four are basically very basic. It's to basically give you the right to fly from one country to another and the other way around, basically, and to actually take people. Of course, the second freedom is the one that allows you to do whatever it does, but just not take passengers, just refuel, basically. It's a freedom that was done, especially at a time when there were no aircraft that were able to do these very, very long routes. Now you have this fifth freedom. You even have, go ahead.
Bahrain to London on Cathay.
Yeah. Oh, see, you've done
it. For that reason, because they couldn't do this was 20 years ago.
Yeah. Like, were they able to actually take passengers?
Yes.
Okay, see, yeah, that's a fifth. So there's a list. I don't have it in front of my eyes, but there's a list of the fifth freedom routes existing in the world. There are actually quite a few, especially in Asia. This is what I'm about to say. So countries, again, like Singapore and Hong Kong have had this type of freedom because they give also these freedoms to other carriers. So that they've always been, but we haven't seen that much in Europe nor in the US, though the US does that. Actually, I did that with, I think it was Northwest. Now it's, who took over Northwest? Delta. Yeah. They flew from, I don't remember maybe San Francisco to Tokyo, and then Tokyo to Manila, Tokyo, and back. And that Tokyo, Manila, Tokyo, I took it several times, and that's a fifth freedom route. I was flying Northwest. So now when you hear the American authorities, or at least the airlines, complaining about Emirates doing that, you're like, yeah, but you've been doing that in Asia for a very long time, because obviously it makes sense. You have to cross first the entire freaking Pacific to go to Tokyo, but then you have all these, and I know they do that obviously for Guam, for territories.
Northwest have had a massive Asian presence for years, decades.
So it still exists. So these are fifth freedom routes. There are other freedoms that are not. The one that we don't see yet a lot is basically an airline that doesn't start in its own country. It just does cater for. Of course, in Europe you see that because Europe is a single fly zone now, the European Union. So you can be. This is why, for instance, you can have Lufthansa flying from Heathrow to the US, because it's considered, Lufthansa, even though it's a German airline, it's considered within the European Union, thus they can fly from Heathrow.
Yeah.
But Emirates could do that.
Well, now they do, Singapore Airlines is Frankfurt, New York, which was waiting to do the return flight right next to my 744 Dreamliner on Friday.
So they exist.
They do absolutely exist.
They do exist.
I wish there were more. I mean,
we wish there were more.
It would totally democratize the air travel experience. But
there's a lot, of course, of lobbying against it because people want to protect their flag career, also want to protect any jobs. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for what. I mean, but you've heard the story. You just sent me that yesterday about a new possible fifth freedom route leaving from actually here, Heathrow.
This is a rumor, but apparently the person that has posited this rumor has absolutely nailed previous predictions. And this rumor is that Emirates are going to launch a Dubai Heathrow somewhere in the US flight or flights. And that is amazing if that happens. Now, again, this is going to take some serious negotiation between by Emirates and the UK authorities, because the open skies agreements do not apply to Emirates.
Exactly.
So the UK government actually does have a pretty strong policy in favor of granting fifth freedom rights to regional airports, UK regional airports, but there's no like automatic fifth freedom approval right for Emirates at the moment. So it will be a process. But they can.
Does the rumor states from Heathrow specifically?
Yes. Specifically, it says Heathrow, but they could be wrong. I mean, it could be Manchester JFK, it could be Manchester San Francisco. I don't know, but I really hope that this happens. I think that there will be a little bit of pressure from BA and IAG, who actually, ironically, are supporters of the ME3 for some obvious and not so obvious reasons. But here's hoping this actually pans out.
Yeah, I've read the entire thread there on airlines. We'll put the link in the show notes. A lot of people mentioned Boston as a potential destination.
It's strange, isn't it? I don't know either. I think JFK makes a lot of sense. If you throw an A380 at that, there's the capacity. God knows there's not just the capacity, but the demand.
I mean, one of the reasons I took Emirates, first I wanted to see how it works. I don't have very high status on Emirates, but I'm still silver, so why not? It was also to see actually, experience that. And it was also because when I looked at the prices between Heathrow, JFK return, they're actually really expensive.
Yeah.
It's a very demanding route. So it means that there's room for competition. Not only, of course, Emirates would like to have a part of the pie here and to get some cash, because obviously it's a very high yield road, but at the same time it would offer as consumers, you and me, I would like to have even more competition, because some of the flights are really expensive from there. I mean, from Milan it cost me at least, I think it was 30% less flying from Milan instead if I had flown from, and we're not even talking about the air passenger duty tax. It was really, really expensive. So I think we both welcome it. You just mentioned that British Airways, so IAG, the parent company, is actually backing the ME3.
Yes, they've come out very aggressively in favor of the ME3 in this deal. They've actually proactively responded to some of those other reports that we mentioned earlier in the show, saying they're nonsense, really, and that the benefits that the U.S. public get from the Gulf carriers are impossible to ignore. And it was very strong language in a well-structured, quite white papery document that they put out. But the cynic in me says, of course, you're going to say that because IAG is partially owned by one of the Middle Eastern carriers.
To bring that point as well, right?
So you have every right to be a little bit skeptical here about their motivations.
Which, by the way, coming back to the Emirates story, flying a fifth freedom route from Heathrow, you could also mention, because also Heathrow has some participation from, I think it's Etihad or Qatar, I don't remember now. But anyway, meaning that there might be also some
one of the interested parties, yeah.
So you could also have some pushback against Emirates, basically Emirates being not battled by US or the UK, but being battled by their competitors back in the Middle East. So that's a very convoluted but interesting story to follow.
Exactly. The IAG thing is, we're going back to protectionism, and we can't do that. So this, it's again a very interesting thread and a very vocal and passionate response from IAG of all people.
Yeah, they mentioned that the UAE is now America's largest export market in the Middle East. U.S. exports and foreign direct investment to the UAE rose basically sixfold in just 9 years, and that's thanks, at least to a large part, to open skies. And I think there's no way denying it. I understand both sides' arguments, but there is something about open skies that makes the market. I mean, we've seen it in Europe. Since basically Europe became a single sky market, that has allowed stuff like EasyJet and Ryanair. That has allowed like so much new competition in the market. I think it's understandable as a legacy carrier. You want to protect your market, but at the same time, it creates so much more opportunity and innovation, especially for us passengers. So I'm kind of glad that IAG is supporting that.
Me too.
But then, while we say that, at the same time in Amsterdam, there's a different story.
Yeah, Amsterdam, the Dutch government has said that Gulf carriers will not be given any new landing rights at Schiphol. And this is just pure protectionism, it sounds like. They've said that because of, this is a quote, because of talk of unfair competition, not evidence or actual talk of, that they're restricting it. And then there's a quote from the CEO of KLM, former CEO of KLM, right underneath it saying, this is going to directly affect employment in the Netherlands. It's like, well, I'm no, analyst here, but it's fairly obvious to go, okay, KLM will put pressure on the Dutch government saying we're hemorrhaging cash here. We're getting massive amounts of pressure from these guys. We can't afford to improve the product so that we can compete. Please do something.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it, again, maybe a little bit of a cynical view, but it's so obvious. And the worst bit is Emirates have come out and said, we can expand from elsewhere.
Yeah, and
So,
they will actually.
yeah.
Because the flight I took from Milan, I didn't know. I was messaging you as it was there, and I said I'm very curious to see if the load factor is big or not, because maybe it's just there's also a flight that goes from Dubai to JFK direct, so it doesn't make a lot of sense for a lot of people maybe to go through a stopover. And if there's enough capacity for just the Milan JFK bit, it actually was, the plane was actually pretty full. And Tim Clark, the CEO, says that he saw that it's very profitable. So he actually said, it doesn't say how much, but he says it's very profitable. And adds that if the Danes or the Swedes were to come to us and say we haven't got enough flights in the US, would you consider it? Yes, we might do that.
Yeah.
So,
Which is such a
I'm sure they, there's only a few. Coming back to your story about Heathrow, there's only a very few, because Heathrow is at capacity, so very few landing slots. But there are still landing slots, and I'm sure that Heathrow would consider giving 1-2 EKs, which is, I think, better than Amsterdam saying from the get-go, no, you won't have, and they have capacity. I think it's a bit stupid to do that. Although I understand again the lobbies and that KLM must be doing behind the doors, but it's a bit sad. We're gonna switch continent. We're gonna go to Asia. In a way, because the new CEO of Malaysian is Christoph Muller, so Erlingus and others. But they've announced a very, very, very big plan. I mean, we've been talking about Malaysian quite a lot at the earlier episodes because, of course, they had one of their planes that was shut down. The other plane is still, we don't know where it is. So they're getting a very rough patch. And basically, so Christoph Muller just took over the role of CEO and is basically terminating the entire workforce and starting afresh. Yeah. That is a pretty bold move.
It is. They've offered jobs back to 14,000 of the 20,000 that they let go. But it's basically, it's a new airline. Yeah. It's a new legal entity. They're cutting.
Well, we said that, I think, at some point. I think one of the only options would be to start from fresh. A lot of airlines, even at least in Europe, have done that at some point. When Swissair got into bankruptcy, I think it was 2001, was it? I don't remember it exactly now. Swiss, the new airline, basically was that. It was like, okay, we're just going to start afresh. We're going to renegotiate all the contracts, renegotiate all the leasing of the planes, and we just start afresh. I think this is what they do. I guess it's very traumatic for the country because I think the article says it's the most number of people ever sacked in a single day in Malaysia. So I'm pretty sure, I understand that from, if you live there, it must be quite traumatic. But I think sadly, it might not have been any other solution at this point.
And they're rebranding on September 1st. They haven't said exactly the extent of that rebranding, whether it's a name change or whatever, but they have said that all avenues are open for discussion. So they're really starting afresh. They've seen that while the brand affinity is still strong in Malaysia, elsewhere it's damaged almost beyond repair. It is a sad state of affairs.
But at the same time, Christoph Muller might be the guy that.
Yeah, I mean,
the man of the hour. Because he turned it around.
Yeah, Aer Lingus, Sabina, Lufthansa. I mean, these.
Yeah, so if there's someone we can actually probably do something that may be him. So I mean, we'll see. Good luck to them, and good luck, and also for the remaining employees that will be rehired. I really hope that they can do something because it's always a sad story when you hear an airline basically shutting down.
Yeah.
In a way, talking about shutting down. That type of shutting down this time. That story is a bit both frightening and incomprehensible. So a Singapore Airlines Airbus had its engine shut down mid-flight. Can you go through that?
So it was flying from Singapore to Shanghai. This is basically a brand new A330, and at 39,000 feet, both engines shut down, and it descended safely. It did not plummet. They are a very efficient airplane to about...
Yeah, they can fly without engine
for a long time. To 26,000 feet. That's where they stopped. So they dropped 15,000 feet while they went through the checklist and they fired both engines up. Then, and this is the controversial part, they carried on to Shanghai, which was 100 minutes more flying.
Instead of
declaring an emergency and landing because both your engines shut off. There's so much, and then it gets even weirder. The plane lands, only spends 4 hours on the ground, and returns home.
Yeah.
With passengers.
Yeah.
So obviously speculation is running rampant. That doesn't just happen. Engines don't just shut off. And they're getting a lot of criticism for not landing at the nearest available airfield or carrying on.
Do you think it was a human error?
I think it was human error.
Because, that's in terms of what they do, if you look at their actions, the one you just presented, it looks like there's no technical issue if you allow the plane. So it means that basically somebody just shut down the engine by mistake.
Yeah.
Do you think it's
plausible? Is
it actually even possible to do that very easily and without having like 25,000 warnings and telling you that you shouldn't shut your engines down? I don't know.
Well, so Airbus said that looking at the data, over a period of 13 seconds, engine number 1 stalled twice and recovered itself. Engine number 2 stalled 3 times, recovering itself each time. Engine 1 was commanded to shut down shortly after. And then when they tried to restart it at 370, it didn't. And then it was able to. So they looked at the engine, both engines with borescope. There was nothing wrong with the engines. Both engines were declared serviceable 4 hours later. And then they actually took the engine off so that both of those engines were depaired, i.e. they were not on the same airplane.
Okay. But you would not expect that from Singapore Airlines.
No.
You would expect that. Okay, now I'm not going to name any airlines because it would be really bad, and we promise ourselves not to bash airlines on the podcast. But you would expect that from countries which safety track record
which
is
we'll
not
talk
as
about
strong.
maybe Sunday because we both read an interesting article. But
Singapore Airlines, I would not. There was one article that I read about a passenger, his experience, and he says that basically they didn't really see anything. He said there was a lot of bump. Of course, they felt that the plane was going down. And again, like you said, it was not like a sudden dive or anything. These things are efficient. He said that at some point they were in a thunderstorm, I think, so it was already bumpy. But he says that the bumps became more insistent. And I guess when you don't have any engines, the stability of the plane is a bit lessened. So that's what he felt. But he had absolutely no clue that the engines would shut off and then reignited. And so basically none of the passenger knew about this until, of course, they landed and when they saw these stories. And this passenger says now he's obviously very upset because it's like, shouldn't we not? He knows that there were airfields very close by, so he should have just gone there. Yeah. So it's not a very good image for Singapore Airlines. It's an airline that I trust. Not that I will change my trust now because of that story, but it's pretty damning.
Yeah, it really is. There's obviously a lot of speculation in the aviation circles, and one of them, which I think is quite interesting, is quoting here: "There's a vague possibility that they forgot to turn on engine anti-ice, which is a function in their engines that even if they do fly through icing conditions, it won't bother the engine, and as a result, suffered from engine stalls of ice coming into the engine. Knowing what they did wrong and thus assessing the problem was not going to happen again, there was no need to divert. Possible, but embarrassing."
Very embarrassing. Do you think we will know?
I don't know.
Because when there's a crash, there's a mandate to actually know because the government's involved. Here, it's not. It's an incident, so usually it doesn't have to be released to the public.
Well, I think because it's gone to the Singapore Air Accident Investigation Bureau as a serious incident, and it's gone to ICAO, then I think, and Airbus, I think we'll maybe hear something about this, but I don't think it's going to come up in any headline. You're going to have to dig for it. So very interesting indeed.
We'll follow up. So we're going to the innovation part of the show and still talking about stories that are a bit frightening. We mentioned this story, I don't remember now which episode, about the supposed flight, the hacking of a flight through from a passenger who was a security expert, which accessed some of the avionics. Apparently, again, I'm going to use a lot of very cautious words here because the story is a bit muddy, from his seat. He was able to access through the IFE, so he adapted a USB adapter into a different thing of adapter, was able to kind of log in. That looks like a science fiction movie or like a thriller, so the story was at the beginning that he was just warning that it's possible. And most people also said that, he just accessing the IFE, so he's basically fooling around with your movies or maybe his own movies and that's it. But then what happened, there was an article in Wired, which was pretty interesting, where the FBI went on and said that actually the Chris Roberts, which is the name of the security researcher that we're talking about here, has told them that not only did it access the IFE, it did access the avionics, but worse, he pretends that he has actually even done change of pattern of flights during a flight during this access. Of course, he says that. It doesn't mean he has done it, because he could be boasting, or I don't know. It's true that when you read that, now you're like a bit, and again, we want to be cautious. It's not as if tomorrow everyone can actually remote access a plane, but what do you think about the story?
I find it very hard to believe. I find it very easy to believe up to the point where he was getting the avionics. I mean, there's so many avionics engineers that have commented on that saying it is physically impossible to do what he is claiming. If he says he's seen flight data, speed, altitude, heading, all of that stuff, they say absolutely not a problem, because we're sending it to the IFE anyway so that you can see it on the moving map. So of course you'd be able to see that data. But being able to access flight deck avionics, he said it's not possible.
He said that during the flight, when he was accessing the IFA, he overrode code on the plane's thrust management computer while he was aboard and was able to issue a climb command and make the plane briefly change course. That's again, I don't know. I don't know.
Find it spurious. I really find it hard to believe, and the fact that there's been very little evidence to back up his claims makes me even more skeptical.
No, I absolutely agree. Though the ICAO actually says that there are long-known vulnerabilities in your aircrafts that should be addressed. So it means I don't think. I mean, we'll know more at some point, or maybe we won't. I don't know. It's true that with the computerization in planes, there are still stuff I'm sure that we don't know. As long as, because the part of the story that kind of worries me is that I understand the need. In software we do that. You have hackers, black hats, white hats. They access the computer software and try to hack it, and then they publish the results and say, okay, you should pay attention to that. There've been so many stories over Microsoft, Google, Apple with that. And, they have programs even for that. It's true in the airline industry is maybe not yet responsive to that. Maybe he was trying to warn them. But if he actually took the step to issue a command in flight, for me, that's putting passengers in danger. And that's a step you shouldn't take.
Agreed.
And he was on the plane, so he could have done himself.
I'm amazed that he wasn't arrested if that was actually the case.
Yeah, so we don't know. It's the ICAO actually said that this is just the tip of the iceberg, meaning that there's been, if you go, and because I'm not really into the hacker community myself, but apparently if you go very deep into forums where they talk to each other, there has been a lot of stories about people accessing at least the IFE. There are people will actually, in some IFEs you have to pay for your movie. People were able to get it for free, stuff like that. It seems pretty, this is more fun than anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, it's problematic for the airline, but it's not putting in danger. I don't know. It's true that although I'm not a specialist, and again, we said with Alex, that at some point it would be nice to have someone who's more into security and cybersecurity. It's still, I think, something at least the airlines should pay attention to. And of course, you have the Boeing and Airbus. There's so many things happening. We're still not a Die Hard. Do you remember the movie Die Hard, the second one, Die Harder, where they actually change the ILS and the plane crashes? I mean, I don't think we're still there.
No, at least I hope not.
But a caution should be applied. And it's an interesting story. I'm sure we'll hear more about it.
Yeah.
Talking about bugs, not exactly hacking, but I found that story interesting. United is offering 1 million miles if you are able to find bugs on its website and apps. So we're not talking avionics here. We're not talking about hacking a plane, but it's actually pretty interesting as an offering.
Good idea.
It's a good idea, right? It says the 1 million miles is the higher you can get because it's for remote code execution. So really, when you can do something from far above. There are other tiers, but I think it's a nice way to. I don't know if it will attract, people who do debugging, but it's a nice way. It's a good publicity.
1 million miles. I mean, that's not a small amount of miles.
Yeah, and for the airline, it's actually pretty easy to get instead of giving cash, right? Why not? I think it's Still in the US, you mentioned it briefly earlier, Delta, the new safety video.
Yeah, I saw it in person.
Oh yeah, you did.
I did. I saw it. It's actually quite cute. It is a internet meme safety video, and they basically dredged up every single meme that you can think of to include in this safety video, from Nyan Cat to the Epic Mealtime guys to the Will It Blend guys to Harlem Shuffle to the I Like Turtles kid to it runs the gamut. It's pretty amazing. To Charlie Bit Me. I mean, it's long, and actually I'm told that they have a bunch of different versions of it.
Oh, depending on which aircraft or which route.
And how long you might have in taxi time and all of that.
That's pretty smart.
Which is quite clever. So I haven't seen the full version.
There's only one version on YouTube, I think.
Yeah.
So we'll put the link for that. But it's really. I mean, I must admit, for the longest time, I mean, we mentioned earlier in this show that they're, the CEO making a message before the welcoming is getting cringeworthy. But for the longest time, the safety videos in the US were very, very dull compared, of course, when you think about Virgin, when you think about Air New Zealand, when you think about some airlines in Japan. They are actually upping their game, and why not?
Yeah, I think it's fun. It's become a little bit of a tit for tat between Virgin America and Delta. They both kind of like, and of course, like you say,
was it Delta the one that had some also 80s?
Yes,
the previous one. Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah,
actually. Yeah, that was.
So it's good. It's good. I think it's there's nothing wrong with it.
Nobody. I mean, if you have a very dull safety video, no matter how many times you tell you to pay attention, you don't.
And I would much rather watch Deltas at 6 o'clock in the morning than Virgin America's new one, which would just make me go crazy. If you haven't seen it, look on YouTube. It'll drive me.
By the way, do you remove your earbuds when you have the safety videos?
Yeah.
You have seen a lot of airlines asking for that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because in Europe, I haven't had that many, and I just flew Austrian, and they were clearly asking you to remove your headphones before the safety announcement, which I found, of course, very fair. And I never have my headphones at that time of the flight, but it's true that, I mean, now that they allow you to get your devices in flight mode, maybe, but at least you can still actually listen to music or play a game, whatever. You don't need to pay attention. I mean, it's hard to enforce, I guess.
It is hard to enforce.
But and anyway, it's not even if you don't have your headphones, and you see a lot of people just not paying attention anyway.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is good. Internetist safety video on the internet.
Yeah. Actually, what's just reminded me of something that I shared this with Paul mid-flight, thanks to the wonders of Wi-Fi. But when I was flying from Fort Myers to JFK, I was on the window, and we were flying over the ocean, just on the sort of that outside of the east coast of the U.S. on Florida. And I looked down, and there was an F-15, and I was like, I hope he's not coming to us, because there's obviously a clear spot. Anyway, he wasn't. He was about 10,000 feet below us. But for 20 minutes, he was going about the same speed as us. And that is easily the coolest airplane I've ever seen.
I was wondering how you could see it. I thought you were...
The only reason I was able to see it is because there was nothing but blue, and then this silver arrow underneath us, about 10,000 feet below us. But there's a lot of Florida National Guard have F-15s.
Did you were able to try to take a picture or something?
It was a blurry dot, but it was still neat.
So going back to my experience when I flew from MXP, so Milan to JFK with Emirates, it was a nice experience. I mean, the lounges of Emirates, where anyone was from Emirates, are pretty much the same anywhere in the world. They're very consistent about creating the same lounge experience anywhere.
Do they have their own lounge?
They have their own lounge at Milan. It's a rather good airport. I mean, I remember that when I landed at Milan from Prague, I sent you a message. This is a horrible airport. I kind of revised a little bit my position. We'll talk about Milan in one of the upcoming episodes. But so yeah, they have their own lounge. It's honestly, the experience was very well done. The thing I really like, I don't know if it's for other lounges or for that in Milan, but you can actually board from the lounge.
Yeah, that's nice.
So that's always very nice to be able to. They have actually 2 gates. I was very excited. I remember I sent you a few messages because I was waiting for my flight. It was a pretty long day over there in Milan, and suddenly I see the A380, and I'm like, wow, because Emirates is supposedly introducing the A380 on that route from the June 1st, and I was supposed to fly a 777. So of
I
course,
remember you
for-
sending me a message saying it's on my bid. Oh, never mind.
exactly, because then I didn't realize actually that flight was just the Milan Dubai one, which is already an A380, but not the one continuing to New York. The reason I'm saying that is that so I took the 777, which I adore as a plane as well. It's really one of my favorite aircrafts as a passenger. But in the whole debate we've been having with this US versus ME3, the one thing that we keep saying is that Emirates has this very fantastic product. It's true that when you look at all the ads on the internet, if you've ever flown them, especially in premium, you have this impression of luxury in the skies. Maybe not the residence of Etihad, but still the luxury in the skies. I will admit, though, that a 777, this one was not the newest one, clearly not. I didn't check how old it was. I could have done that with Plane Finder, but I forgot. It was clearly, so Emirates has had always a very similar product in the past decade, but there have been small improvements. So you can actually kind of see which era a plane dates, because so on this one, for instance, there was no touchscreen. There were large screens, but no touchscreen.
300?
I think it was a 300, 200 ER or 300. No, I'm not. I'll have to check.
So their oldest 300 is 16 years old.
See, so it's not that new. But again, I'm talking about the experience. Why am I saying that is because, I've been lucky to fly a few times to the US in premium. I've never flown like you, the upper class on Virgin, but I've flown, for instance, the product which used to be called Envoy, which was US Airways, and it was a lie flat seat. I also flew Delta to the US once in premium, and it was also a lie flat seat. Here we're talking the 777 business product, so not the first, of course, first is like another league as usual, but it's a not lie flat.
That's
so
weird.
It's interesting when you think about this whole debate having about the US versus ME3. In that case, the US are really already have upped their game for business. Of course, maybe there's no gold or anything, but the seating is actually really good in these airlines, whereas here it's slightly angled, which again, I know for those who have never flown premium, I know here is me bragging about flying business class, so please forgive me for that. But in the general discussion, we're still having a product that is not exactly on par with what the US is offering, and I found that pretty interesting.
What about Alitalia? Do you know anything about their premium?
I've never flown Alitalia internationally, so I cannot really say. I know that, we all know that Alitalia is having a lot of issues.
Because I wonder if it was a conscious decision on Emirates' part to deploy an older airplane when they knew the competition was not as strong as it was perhaps on, London JFK.
Maybe you're right. We'll see what happens when they introduce the A380. Will they? I think they will do that. They will introduce their older A380, which is not that old when you think about it, because of course their product is the business class is actually different on the A380. It's lie flat. Though there's less legroom than on the 777s. It's a toss, but anyway, it's interesting to see, again, just the point that finally, when you think about it, American Airlines, the US Airlines, are doing a pretty good job. And talking about that, there's an article in the Designer, Friends of the Designer have talked about their latest product of AA, so American Airlines.
Looks good.
I've never flown them, but it looks really good.
It looks good, doesn't it? If you didn't tell me this was American Airlines, I would have said someone like Asiana or Eva or something like that. It looks good. It's lie flat. It's got the kind of compartments. It's got the faux wood finish, which seems to be very in vogue at the moment. It's neat. I think it looks really, really good. Nice big. They're not huge screens, but they're pretty big screens. It's a very businessy business class, isn't it? It looks like there's lots of people in suits are going to be on this airplane.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. Which also that's the comment when you fly premium, and I know you've done it a few times. I've done it a few times. A long haul, even a short haul. Although short haul, I almost never do it because it's not worth it. Yeah. But it's still true that the gender ratio is still staggeringly crazy. It's like a lot of guys. I'm usually probably the only guy in denims first and a t-shirt and most. Nothing against suits by themselves, but it still shows the demographics are not there in terms of. It's a bit sad to see that. A quick, since we're talking about JFK, it's not JFK. We're talking about New York. I don't know. I'm really far from being a specialist into, I love the air travel experience as a passenger and all the guys around it. You are more into aircraft, into what goes around the entire network of how you have to fly an aircraft. And there's been this article, I was in the US reading that the FAA is deploying something called Datacom, which basically allows, and we should have maybe back our friend from ATC in San Francisco, which basically allows the pilots on the ground to talk directly, instead of talking, radioing the tower, to do all these inputs directly electronically. And that saves apparently a lot of time. So they're deploying that in Newark, or they have deployed that in Newark, which is another airport near to New Jersey, so near to New York. And I think another one. So what do you think about that?
It's cool. I think it's going to be a big help. I wonder if this is the project that Dan was involved in, that he was alluding to when we spoke to him on the show a few
that
months
would change
ago.
his job. I mean, not that everybody would do that immediately. That would kind of change the scope of his job. Is only he had to respond to electronic commands instead of talking. I'm not sure that talking would be.
There was it KLM who was putting out a really interesting series of videos at the beginning of this year, which is how we fly across the Atlantic. And,
True. Yep.
And I think that there was a mention of it where they just, especially when you're going over the Atlantic and there's no radio coverage anyway, where they're doing kind of, I want to take this route or I want to climb 2,000 feet because of weather, and it was pure text back and forth.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. I've seen that video.
But then Australia was testing something, this was like 10 years ago, that was basically completely automated. You could pick whatever your route, and the software on the ground would go,
Wow.
This is safe, this is unsafe, yes, go for it, no, go for it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's evident we're going to that direction. I don't think we'll cut completely the voice.
No.
We still need to have like a human interface. But it's true that, especially if you can save time, I don't have the article in front of me, but I think either it was because the article that I found here was because I saw the story on TV in the US, and on TV, I love American, the US news, by the way, so it's very entertaining with the article. Sorry, but it showed that it was also fastening the whole process of getting a plane from gate to take off and opposite. Apparently, it would actually also fasten operations, allowing more fluidity in the airport. That's what the report says on TV. I don't have any numbers here to say if it's actually the case, but of course, that's interesting to, well, again, for the passenger to fly faster outside of you were actually on the ground for quite a while in JFK, right?
Yeah, because of my later flights and all of that, I was on the ground for about 4.5 hours.
Oh,
but what a great airport to be a plane nerd in, right? You look out the window and what a sight you got in front of you.
Yeah, that's an amazing. Yeah, I agree with that one. It's amazing. You were on Terminal 4 as well.
Terminal 4, yeah, the newly refurbished.
It's pretty cool,
decrapified terminal. Yeah, it's actually very good. Very good. Great food. 2 Shake Shacks.
Oh, wow. I mean, I was there. I'd been there last time, maybe 2 years ago. It was under refurbishment. It was like very underwhelmed. Before that, it was a disaster. And now I've also been to Terminal 4 very recently because it's also where Emirates is. And actually, it is not really good.
It's not bad.
Honestly, the Americans are stepping up their game. I'm going to stop saying they're doing bad airports. So, back to seats with Singapore Airlines. So, have you flown Premium Economy and Cathay recently? Was it to Hong Kong? Was it Premium Economy?
It was Premium Economy, yeah, on Cathay. I've flown business in Singapore Airlines recently, but not Premium Economy.
Because the reason, so I think we mentioned it. I'm not absolutely sure, but I'm going to restate. So Singapore Airlines is introducing Premium Economy, a new Premium Economy version of its flight. The reason I was reminded of this is, again, the designer. These guys are so lucky to be invited by Singapore Airlines to the launch event in Singapore. They flew there. I think they even flew in business. They have an entire report on the designer.net. I'll put the link. Bastards, you're so lucky. I'll come back a little bit later to that report because it's the one thing interesting. But the interesting part that I thought about too is that actually, for a long time, Singapore Airlines was one of the most, they were at the top of their game. They were the one with the best business seats. They were the one they always were thinking of the passenger experience. And for Premium Economy, though, they were not. Cathay Pacific was better for the longest time. Cathay Pacific say that the Premium Economy is a very successful product.
Yeah.
So that's what now this time you have Singapore actually reacting to the competition.
Yeah, it's not a position they're used to being.
Yeah, and so it looks really cool.
Looks
honestly.
great.
Really cool. Big TV. I mean, the wine. I mean, the usual stuff. The seats are wider. But one thing that actually I read in the designer.net report I really liked is that they even say it's a game changer. Is that the armrest on the AL seat is movable, so you can actually have it low. So if you're someone who is tall or big or anything, you're not constrained by the size of the seat, and
That's
and
interesting.
you can stay there lower in its lower position for most of the flight. I guess during taxiing and landing and takeoff, not. But that's
What a
pretty
good
cool.
idea.
It's a very good idea, and also obviously for people with mobility issues. If I think about my dad who's 83. That's one of the hardest things was to get out of his seat, even though there's leg room. If you have that kind of easy access to the AL, that's a pretty good idea.
It's a good idea.
It's a pretty good idea. I like that. So Singapore, I don't know if Singapore was really part of that golden age of travel, but I don't know if you've seen that Emirates ad.
Yeah. What a clever, fun thing to do.
I mean, so the ad, we'll put the link, but basically the ad, what it is, it shows images that we've all seen online about how it was fantastic to fly airlines back in the day, the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, everyone's wearing a suit and their best Sunday dress,
And then, and I think they even use like the old voices to tell you how great it is to fly. And then they move very quickly to what it is to actually fly today with queues. And of course, the images are very poorly put on purpose. It makes a real distinction, and then you go back to, hey, and here's how we fly at Emirates. I mean, obviously it's a cheap shot, but it's a really, honestly, it's a fun one.
It's very clever. I mean, it's so obviously pointed at the US, but it's
obviously
it's good. It's quite clever, and they make some good points too.
Another Emirates is just, I received the email actually, so this is why I added this story last minute, is that Skywards is the frequent flyer program of Emirates. They will offer 1 million Skyward miles, again, that's number 1 million, to 15 people in celebration of the program's 15th anniversary. So it's pretty easy, I think. You have to answer 3 very simple questions that are very straightforward. Then you still have to take a flight with Emirates between May 29th and June 30th. Of course, I'm very upset because I'm not going to fly. So I flew them just before, and I didn't know about that thing. So now I'm not going to be able to participate in that thing. And interestingly, is that if you enter the game to win these 1 million miles, but if you book via the iPhone or Android app, you double your chances of winning.
Okay.
So they actually also push you towards doing that through the phone. So anyway, it's a fun little story about miles, and the anti-fun little story about miles is coming too. So I was on the way back from my Emirates flight to Milan. I was supposed to take a BA flight back to London, but my BA flight, so I built time to. I booked the flight late at night. It was the only 3 flights per day back to London Heathrow from MXP. And I was like, if I'm lucky, I'm getting just in time and I can change my BA flight to the earlier one. But I really had like 30 minutes. Of course, that didn't work. So I arrived the BA flight. So I had 7 hours to wait. And I'm like really tired. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to wait 7 hours in Milan. So I canceled my flight from BA and I book Go Ticketing. Because I went on my Lufthansa app, and Lufthansa app doesn't allow you to book same-day flights, which is
that's
bad.
silly.
Yeah, that's actually silly, right? So I went to the ticketing office, and I say, okay, what's the next flight to London? Of course, I had to do a stopover. But anyway, so I take the flight, etc. Long story short, what I learned afterwards is that they penalized me on the miles I was gaining on that flight because I booked it last minute.
It's ridiculous, because you would have been paying a higher fee for a walk-up fare.
I didn't pay a higher fee. So I'm like, I'm paying a higher fee. I'm ensuring that there are flights that is only adding load factor to their flights, and they're penalizing me for it.
That's ridiculous.
I don't understand the logic behind it. I actually sent them an email and say, guys, it's not about the miles because I wasn't doing like a lot of miles with such a flight. But
it's
like,
just
the logic is not.
No,
why would you penalize me to do this?
I'm going to assume that you haven't heard back from them.
No, not yet. Of course, obviously not. But I'll follow up if I ever hear back. Another little contest, since I just mentioned the Emirates one. So Air France every year does a Flying View contest.
Good too.
Honestly, when they started that contest, so yeah, maybe I'll explain what it is. You have to basically share pictures of your own way of seeing the world. That's what they say. You can win up to 200,000 miles, which is not bad actually. And on top, you can have a platinum membership to their Flying Blue program for a full year. So it's really nice. But the thing is, when the program started, when these competitions started, I mean, we were taking pictures where, Instagram and, and now when you go to the website, you look at the pictures, they look like there's no way that would be able to do such pictures.
No.
They look, National Geographic.
The last year's winners were just stunning.
So, I mean, if you're a good photographer, you should actually, because why not? 200,000 miles gets you a long way with Air France. You can actually do pretty nice trips. So you should sign up. We'll put the link on the show notes. But about taking a picture during flight, there was a story I shared to you. That's pretty crazy. It's not the first time I heard something about this, but it was the story, to make it short. There's a music agent waiting at Reagan National. He wants to take a picture of the aircraft of American Airlines with his smartphone. I do that all the time.
Me too.
I'm always taking pictures of aircraft when I'm waiting. This is one of my favorite things to do at airports. But a gate agent stops him and basically saying that he's threatening security by doing so. What do you think about this?
I think it's insane. I don't understand how they could possibly think that would be the case.
And I mean, either. It's for me, I'm baffled. I mean, I understand. There's a limit. I understand that it's uncomfortable maybe to take pictures of other people because there's no consent. Of course, you're in a public space, etc. But an aircraft, I mean, and apparently, according to that article, there's a lot of leeway. They can, it's basically the gate agent could decide that you are doing something against security, and that's it. And there's no official policy either by American Airlines and other airlines to actually tell you not to do. I mean, do you know of any policy? Did you have any such policy at Virgin?
No, I don't know about any official policy, but I know that when you're on board of the airplane, the game changes even more, because if you say no, then you're interfering with the operations of flight crew, and that's a federal crime in the U.S. So the stakes are pretty high for taking that picture, but I still think it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
I agree. I don't know what to, anyway, it's just be careful, I mean, maybe it's more the case in the US than anywhere else, I don't know, but you have to be careful about this. I remember, I don't have any links or anything, but I remember such a story 2 or 3 years ago when somebody was taking a picture within the aircraft and but nothing was happening. It was not taking a picture of a fight or anything. It's just taking a picture of a seat. And the attendant was also telling him or her to remember that was not authorized and should delete the picture. It's a bit weird. I don't know. It's just so be a bit cautious when you do that.
Yeah, and don't pick a fight.
Don't pick a fight. Yeah, if I wouldn't take a fight either. So then, very quickly, I found this article on Business Insider. Have you heard about Skypicker?
I have not heard about Skypicker.
Do you want to run through what it is, or should I do it?
Yeah, no, I haven't heard about it.
So it's basically, when we book, we talked about Google Flights, we talked about all of Kayak and all the other things, and apparently, it's true that when it comes,
I know the founder. I'm just looking at the article now. I'm like, I know her.
See, apparently so it's basically matching unmatchable flights. Basically, when you try to book a flight from point A to point B, it could be a cheaper way to do it from point A via point C back to point B. So basically, it says, I'm flying from London to, let's say, what could I say, Athens. And maybe instead of taking, there's AGN doing that flight, or BA, it could be actually less expensive to fly Turkish to Istanbul and then Istanbul to Athens via Olympic for something. So That's what they do. They try to match these unmatchable, these kind of routes that are a bit hidden because they do not make sense, but they could be much less expensive. This is a bit why you try to do sometimes. You say on Matrix, you say, I'm going to fly instead of flying from London because you want to avoid the passenger duty tax, I'm flying from Dublin. So it's an interesting model. And apparently they made a lot of money with it because they said, so they had a revenue of $4 million through April, fourfold increase from 2014, and they're booking about almost $200,000 in sales. They look to go very successful, and they are So that data, because they have a website, but the data, they will actually be soon displayed to Kayak and Skyscanner. So
I don't know. It's like I'm looking at the site right now, and they claim to be able to get me from London to Copenhagen for 15 euros.
Wow. So I don't know.
Non-stop on Ryanair.
I haven't tried them. I just read that, and I thought that it was they say, interestingly, what they say is that the biggest challenge they had was to convince airlines to give them inventory, because the airlines were like, yeah, but it means that you're flying, instead of flying us to your destination, you're flying us to another point to fly someone else to the other point, because you want to actually. But apparently they were able to convince airlines because they added to the load factor, and they're successful. I've never tried it, so I don't trust my word. I'll put the link on the show notes, but I will definitely take a look at it next time I book a flight. It looks up. Alex is not, because it's in front of me, as we told you at the beginning of the show. He's like so baffled with the prices he's seeing that he stopped talking, because I think he's seeing like you can go for around the world for like maybe $20 or something.
I don't. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to look into this. Okay, so here's an example. Not Czech Republic. I don't want to do that. Okay, well, yeah, just to give you a sense of scale, anywhere in the Czech Republic to Nagoya,
Okay.
in Japan, 450 euros, and that's Prague to Helsinki, Helsinki to Amsterdam, Amsterdam to Hong Kong, Hong Kong to Nagoya,
Wow.
and that's on Norwegian, Finnair, and Cathay. So not messing around.
Wow. But you see how they like link different companies together. I mean, you can see sometimes this kind of data but it usually is on just simple return flights with multiple airlines.
Yeah.
But this is clever because it goes even further. It tries to find routes with alternatives. So, okay, it has you time because you have to do a layover, but it can be very competitive. That's
the data buying here must be staggering.
So
good for them.
Good for them. So I mean,
I will message Lucy, the
say hi
the
for us.
CFO, and say, so how are you doing this?
So that's cool. It could be an app of the week one day.
Yeah.
Because the app of the week. So we haven't done app of the week because we always said. But there's one thing that I was again at Milan. So it's not an app, but I'll tell you. I was at Milan airport and I'm waiting for my flight to the US, the Emirates flight, and I'm just hanging around. There's nothing much to do. I was a little bit in the lounge and I was outside just like take pictures of planes, like we just said. And I see that box, and I see a box that says that I can just get rid of my coins and get stuff in return. I'm like, what? Yeah. And I put it on PayPal. So I'm attracted immediately by the box. It's a yellow box. And it's really clever. It's called TravelersBox. So we mentioned on one episode that you remember the TSA was doing almost $800,000 of profit just by the little coins that people were leaving at security. So these box solve not that issue, but something in general. You're traveling and you have foreign currency, so when you have bills, you can actually exchange them back more often than not. But coins not. So sometimes you donate it, right? So you have these big boxes at Singapore, Shanghai. You have these big boxes. You just donate money. So here you can as well. You basically put the coins in the machine. This one was accepting dollars and euros, and then you can actually put them on your PayPal account, on somebody else's PayPal account. You can buy a Starbucks gift card. There's a lot of other gift cards for other vendors. Or you can also donate, so they don't eliminate that donation part of it. So I found that extremely clever.
Such a good idea. I was so funny because when I got to the station this morning, I was like, I could really do with a cup of coffee. And I reached into the pocket on my backpack and pulled out 6 different currencies, none of which would be accepted by Starbucks in London. But I absolutely see the value in this product. And the fact that you can deploy the change to your Starbucks card or Skype or like these.
It's actually interesting because when you click on it, they first ask you which is your country of residency. So because then it can offer you something that is bespoke to you. So for instance, I mean, I don't know about Starbucks cards because I've never actually bought one. But let's pretend for argument's sake, the Starbucks cards are limited to their country of origin.
Yeah.
It means that what I will buy will be actually will be working in my country of residency, or actually, if I want another country, I could choose. So it's really, they just got funding. So with an article of TechCrunch, honestly, like 5 days after I've seen them, they've got a funding of $4.5 million. So good for them. I think, but I'm not sure. They're based in Turkey. I've looked at their map on their website. They're sadly not that many airports in Europe yet, but they told me, because of course I chatted with them on Twitter, they're deploying, and I think it's a box that should be in every single airport
I
in the
agree.
world.
Multiple points around the airport. It's such a good idea.
It's just a good idea. Have you seen any box like that at Atlanta?
I did not. No.
So Atlanta Airport. I've never been to Atlanta Airport. I mean, you chose to create the name of the show Atlanta because you've been through it very recently.
Yeah.
And then also we found this crazy story.
Yeah. So okay, let's talk about Atlanta Airport. So
First,
it has been the world's busiest airport since 1988, and it is massive. But actually, in terms of efficiency, I was impressed. It worked well. The only thing that sucked is when I was last in the US, I signed up for TSA Pre, which you pay $80 a year or whatever it was. And it means that when you go through security, you don't have to take your shoes off. You can keep your laptop in your bag. You can put your coat on, leave your coat on.
Yeah.
You have a separate channel to go through security. I was like, awesome. The security to transfer between terminals. So I got off my flight, gone through immigration, which was a piece of cake. It was kiosk based.
Yep.
In Atlanta. So I was through US immigration in 30 seconds. But since I was connected to a domestic flight, I had to go back through security. I was like, "Oh, cool! I'm gonna use TSA Pre. I'm excited." And I go, "So where?" I said to the guy at the queue, "Where's TSA Pre?" He's like, "Nope, we don't do that here." And I'm like, "Oh no!" It's like that episode of The Simpsons, the Itchy and Scratchy Land, where he buys a bunch of itchy and scratchy money, and none of them stop to take it. Anyway, sorry, learning about Simpsons, but it's a very big. I mean, there's almost. This year they'll do 100 million passengers through that airport. It's extraordinary. It is.
It's almost a million flights. It's
almost a million flights. Yeah, it's really an extraordinary thing. It's not a fun place to do a layover. There's not much to do there at all. The food was awful. It was like Subway and Burger King and stuff like there was a Blue Moon brew house there, which was okay, but nothing compared to JFK or anything like that. But it was not a good place to do a layover. But my flights left on time. The boarding was the gates were huge.
Do you have to walk a lot inside? Because it looks like a big airport.
They have
people movers.
They have people movers. There's a plane train that you have to take, like many of these big airports by necessity of their sheer size, because there's like 1,000 feet between each of the concourses, which is a long way.
That's a long way. The reason I've never flown it is that, and I think we mentioned it in our previous podcast episode, is that although it's this massive, huge airport, one of the busiest in the world, if not the busiest, depending on how you count again, most of the flights are domestic.
Yes, and because of the way the airport was designed to take that, and so you can actually do some pretty tight connections through Atlanta if you're staying domestic. International, you're gambling. I think if you're going through any U.S.
Any U.S. airport international is, of course, because they're not made for that. They're clearly made
if you're coming in, I mean, going through JFK, I could have done it with a half an hour layover because it was same terminal. If I had my boarding pass. Coming in, forget it. But it's a monster airport.
Wow, that's impressive, actually.
Yeah, and getting from Atlanta as a city is also massive, but they have a rail system, which is nice.
You do.
Quite rare in the US.
Yes, it is.
You can take, it's called MARTA. I kept wanting to say Martha. It's called MARTA, and it gets into the city, and then there's actually only about $30 to take a taxi to downtown, which is kind of. I've spent zero time in Atlanta. I really need to get out there because
I've never been actually.
Love the South. But I mean, it's one of those airports that has almost legendary status.
Exactly.
Just because of the number of movements,
it's your size.
The size, the fact that it's Delta's home. And because I was in the international terminal, and there wasn't actually that much reference, but everywhere you look, there's just a Delta airplane. Delta tugs, Delta baggage carts and trolleys and trucks. And it's just, and Southwest have a massive presence there as well.
I think, I would say that. Although, it's mostly a hub for southeastern of the United States and Southwest. Sorry, it was just fun to say.
And weirdly, now because of Virgin's tie-up now that Delta owns 49% of Virgin, there's a lot of Virgin traffic there as well.
Okay. Oh, wow.
They do flights to London a couple of times a day at least, and Manchester, weirdly. But yeah,
It's interesting that no matter, every time I look up an airport in the US, it seems that the busiest international route is always London Heathrow. It seems to be really like this focal point of like all the.
One of my favorite things about Atlanta is there's an old joke in the South apparently that says, when you die, irrespective of whether you're going to heaven or hell, you will connect to Atlanta Airport.
That's a very good one. Oh wow, that's a very good one. I don't have anything to add about that airport because I've never been to. I don't know if there's. I mean, there's a crazy story. Let's run through it because it's a bit stupid, and we do not want to actually. We're not here about to bash Atlanta Airport. It's nothing to do with just that happened this morning or yesterday. I read this article about this gentleman was carrying an assault weapon in the airport directly. I mean, so the state has open carry laws, so you're allowed to have a gun on you. Again, I'm not here to debate about that, but it's true that an assault weapon in an airport, I mean, that would be a flag for me. It was like, I mean, unless you're in a country like, I mean, there's some airports when you land, you know it's a dangerous zone, so you have military officers, etc. So that's a bit different. But here, I'm not sure how I would feel about that.
This guy, he had this assault rifle with 100 round drum on it, slung around his back while he was dropping his wife and daughter off at the airport, and it made a lot of people understandably nervous. And security was questioning him and saying, why are you doing this? And he basically said, because it's my right to do that. And it's like, you're kind of a dick if you do that, because it's going to make people. I mean, I'm not commenting on the law. I just think it's such a strange thing to do. And his rationale was, you never know what might happen. It's like, that's okay. Interesting way, but that would have made me feel extremely nervous.
Yeah, extremely nervous. Yeah, me too. Anyway, nothing to do exactly with Atlanta, but just that it was a fun story. So don't worry, you're not going to see that every time you land or depart from Atlanta Airport. I really hope I'll be able to fly there soon. I mean, I fly Delta a lot, so at some point in my life, I will end up being there. So we'll maybe take up that airport once more. So I cannot actually say if it's a cube or not. Is it a good airport for layovers? No.
Good airport for connections, not a good airport for layovers.
And on that, Alex, I guess I'll see you next week.
Yes.
Okay, bye-bye.
Take care.
Happy flying.
On behalf of Layovers and the entire crew, we would like to thank you for joining us on this podcast today. And we're looking forward to seeing you on board again next week. Flight attendants, please prepare for landing.